So I want to do a real quick run through of how to use tools, and then we'll get to the atlas and the timeline. Um, so one of the things, I've been talking about amplifying all day long, and I haven't really mentioned the most obvious way to amplify, which is to triple click on any word. So if I'm in Greek, if I triple click, that's basically a shortcut to amplifying to the resource of the type that's most appropriate for the word that you triple click. So if you triple click on a Greek word, you'll go to your default Greek lexicon. If you triple click on a Hebrew word, it'll go to your default Hebrew lexicon, English word, English dictionary. If you're in a Bible text with Strong's numbers, triple clicking will take you to the Strong's number dictionary, which is nice most of the time, but sometimes you really want to look up the English word. And the trick there is just hold down the Shift key. I think it's the Shift key. And triple click on an English word in a text with Strong's numbers, and it will look up the English word in your default English dictionary, not the Strong's number in your default Strong's dictionary. So anyway, triple clicking is a really nice way to access all of these different tools. And so I triple clicked on the Greek word agapeses, and it brought up agapao. And when you triple click or amplify, accordance will also include the scripture reference that you triple clicked from, which is really helpful in a resource like BDAG because they all use, I think, 2-letter book name abbreviations, and trying to find the verse reference in a long article is like finding a needle in a haystack. So by doing the search, it becomes highlighted, and you can see it right away. Okay, so it makes it much easier to find the information that you need. What we're actually doing here by searching for the scripture reference and the Greek entry is we're searching by different fields. And each of your accordance tools are divided into fields of content, types of information. So let's just open up a different tool. We'll do Anchor. All right, here we go. All right, so here's Anchor Bible Dictionary. Let me just magnify this zone. And in this token here, you can choose what field you want to search. And so we have, when we prepare an accordance module, we actually go through and we look at what kinds of information are contained in this module. And then we divide them into these different fields. So you'll generally have the first field will be the titles or entry field. And then you'll have an English content, which is basically the body of the article. So if I search the entry field for David, I'll find articles with David in the title, right? And I'll also find sub-articles that mention David and so on. So that's the entry. I found 31 hits searching the entry field. But Anchor Bible Dictionary is a 6-volume Bible dictionary. Surely there are more than 31 hits of David in Anchor. So if we switch to English content, that's the body of the article, we get 4,800 or 4,612 hits, including the name of the editor. Yes?
This is a really stupid question, I admit, but I don't understand. I cannot figure out how you go from one hit to the next. In most applications, it's tab. In accordance, it is not tab, but I've tried everything, I think.
Okay.
I don't know how you do it.
Down here, you've got these little arrows right here that say hit. Just click down to go from hit to hit.
Oh, okay, I guess I never looked at it because I think of them as chapters.
Right. Those are added in tools and when you have all context in the Bible. All right, so that's the English content. We also have bibliography. If I search David in bibliography, I'm going to find another 341 hits. The thing that dividing the tool into these different fields of content does is, first of all, it makes it easy to find the 31 articles that have David in the title, as opposed to having to wade through 5,000 hits, right? By putting the bibliography into its own field, it also sort of cleans all of those occurrences of David out of the English content. So if you're searching English content, you don't have to wade through bibliographic entries and so on. So it enables you to take these massive works and be able to filter your search down a little bit. All right? When you amplify, Accordance will actually go through all of the fields and look for the word that you amplified from. So if I let's see if I can give you a good example of this. I'll tell you what, let's just do individuals. I'm just going to select the word individuals, and I'm going to amplify to anchor. All right, now, see that. Doing a demo is a little like being a lawyer. You know, you never want to ask a question that you don't already know the answer to. You never want to try something that you don't know is going to work. I thought individuals might be a word that would not appear in the entry, but in a massive work like Anchor, it did appear in the entry. Let's try Samaritanism. Maybe that'll work. All right, there we go. Notice it didn't find the word Samaritanism in any of the titles of the articles. So it went to the next field, English content, to find it. If it didn't find it in English content, it would have gone down through all the rest of the fields until it found something. So you'll sometimes run into this where, let's say, let me try and find something. Sometimes you may triple click on a Greek word, and you may get an instance of BDAG. And then you'll triple click something else and you'll get another instance of BDAG, right? Does that ever happen? Or you'll get 2 occurrences of anchor or something like that. What's happening is Accordance will recycle a window. That's what this little recycle symbol is. And if it's on, it means reuse this window. So I can triple click on word after word after word, and it's going to keep recycling that window. However, if it can't find a word in the Greek entry, if I triple click on a word that it doesn't happen to have, let's say I go to the Septuagint and I triple click a Septuagint word that's only in the Septuagint. It may be in BDAG somewhere in the body of the article. Then what it's going to do is open up a copy of BDAG, finding that word in the Greek content, not the Greek entry. And so that's why it opens a second occurrence of BDAG. Does that make sense? It will recycle the window as long as it doesn't have to change any of the search parameters. As soon as it has to change the search parameters, it says, okay, well, let's not mess with what he's got here. Let's open up something else. And that's how you'll end up with 2 occurrences of the same tool. And you know, if you keep triple clicking, if one goes to the Greek entry and one goes to the Greek content, you'll actually see those windows pop back and forth, you know, up for you. So understand how recycling works and that's what's going on there. All right, but Accordance will not recycle a window if it's got to change one of these search parameters. All right, so that's the fields, and you can add as many fields as you want. So you can get really sophisticated in searching a tool. If I'm, you know, let's say I want to search Biblical Archaeology Review for all articles that have Megiddo in the title and that have Solomon in the body of the article and have you know, the water tunnel or something in the captions. You can get really specific with your searches. All right, so let's look at another kind of tool. I'm going to open up Church Fathers, Ante-Nicene Fathers. All right, and this is the entire first 10 volumes or 9 volumes or so. Let's see. All right, 9 volumes of the big early church fathers set by Schaff. And the first 10 of them are on the Ante-Nicene Fathers. And you've got all of these different volumes with all of these different fathers, you know. And so if I do a search for something like love, I find, you know, well, 53 hits in the titles. Let's broaden it to English content. I found 3,000 hits. All right, but let's say that I'm, you know, particularly interested in just volume 1. All right, the Apostolic Fathers. How do I narrow my search down to? Well, in fact, let's say it's not even all of the Apostolic Fathers. Let's say it Barnabas and Barnabas through Irenaeus. Okay. How do I narrow my search down so that I can search just that part of a really big tool? You can go into the table of contents here, and if you hold down the Option key and click on the title of a section in the table of contents, it will become highlighted in red. And when I do a search now, I've essentially created a custom range on the works of Barnabas. And so, so I get 22 occurrences rather than 3,000. All right, if I want to, I think if I Shift Option click Irenaeus, well, maybe I have to do each one. But if I do those 4, now I get 229 occurrences. All right, so you can actually use the browser as a way to set a custom range. All right. Another thing that you can do with the browser, if I want to take this off, I'm just going to Option click that red bar, and that gets rid of the range. And now I'm back to 3,000 hits. Okay. Another thing that you can do with the browser is as you're going from hit to hit, all right, let's go somewhere in the middle here and go to the next hit. All right, so here I am, but where am I? Right, I'm in the middle of something. This is chapter 1 of Discourse 9 of who, you know. So what I can do is go to the table of contents and just hold down the Option key when I click it, and it will expand the table of contents so that I can see where I am in context. So I can see, okay, this is under Methodius, Discourse 9, Chapter 1. Okay, so that's a handy little trick. Option click the table of contents, and you can do it within, if I go to the next hit, I've already got the table of contents open. Right, but if I Option click here, let's see. Well, actually, I'm still in. If I Option click under Methodius, then that's going to expand everything out. Okay. All right. So that's the table of contents. And one other thing to consider when searching a tool. Oh, you've also got flex and exact searching in a tool, but we needed a way, because we already had the token being used for fields, we needed a way to give you an obvious way to specify exact or flex hits. And so that's this magnifying glass right here. So if the magnifying glass has the little squiggle, you know, that you use for on the top of an equal sign for equivalency, right? Then it's a flex search. If I click it, it'll change to an equal sign, and that will be an exact search. So let's see, we got 1,000 fewer hits with the exact search because it was finding loves and loving and so on. Okay, so you can control that. And this other icon here lets you specify whether you want your search to take place within an article or within a paragraph. And this only really matters when you're searching for multiple items. So if I were to, I'm just going to get rid of my text there. If I were to do love and Christ, all right? Right now, this icon tells me that it's searching within each article. Well, an article, in this case, is a chapter, chapter 21. And so it finds Christ. Well, here it does find Christ and love in the same paragraph. All right, that one's not too bad because the chapters are all basically paragraphs anyway. But if you've got, a long dictionary article in Anchor Bible Dictionary and you want to find where love and Christ are mentioned together, if you search within the same article, you may get Christ in the first paragraph of the article, and then 10 paragraphs later, you get love. And that may be what you want, but it may not. You may want, no, I really mean I want these two things to be close together. So you can specify that the search take place within the same paragraph. And so if you click on that icon, now it's a paragraph icon. And if I do this search, let's see what we get. We get 2,000 fewer hits because now Christ and love have to be in the same paragraph. Before, there were cases where they may have been 5 or 6 or 10 paragraphs apart. Yeah?
And I guess can you still use the within X number of words parameter?
You can always do that, yeah. So instead of the and command, you also have the within command. And you could say, within 40 words if you wanted to, or something like that, rather than changing from paragraph to article. But you want to be aware of whether you're searching the paragraph or the article, especially in certain cases where we've got some really unique tools. Go ahead.
So this is how to search tools, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so what are some default tools? Because I don't have this one. Or how do I even know what tools I have?
The tools are all in your library. And they're all down here under tools. And they'll be divided into a variety of different categories, depending on what you have. So it all depends on what package you have. All right, so I'm going to show you a couple of a very specialized tool that is really more like a database. Well, I'll tell you what, let's just do this. I'm going to open up the Hebrew Bible and the Greek Septuagint. All right, so I've got Hebrew and Greek together, and the Greek is a translation of the Hebrew. But I need a way to see correspondences between these two. All right, right now, these are parallel only by verse. So I see verse 5 in one compared to verse 5 in the other. But I have to do the work of figuring out, okay, well, vayikra, okay, that means to call. So what's the Greek word that means to call? Ekalasin, and so on. All right? So years ago, Emmanuel Tove developed a database where he actually figured out what Hebrew words are being translated by what Greek words or phrases. And he's even got notations of what kind of translation is going on and so on. And it's called the MTLXX database. I'm going to just add it as a parallel tool. I think it's under, is it Semitic Studies? Yep. Okay, thank you. So I'll add it as a parallel. And you can see, let's see, I'm trying to get it in columns here. That's too small. Let's move it down.
How did you get that again?
I went to Add Parallel, and then under Reference Tools, the category is Semitic Studies. MTLXX parallel. And you may not have it. It's a pretty specialized tool that I don't know that we have in any packages. Right. All right, I'm going to move it down here just so you can see what it is. So here you've got, for Genesis 1:5, Va and Yikra parallel with Kai Ekalasin, Elohim with Hotheos, Laor with Tophos, and so on. All right, well, that's helpful, just as a tool as you're scrolling along. But the real power of the MTLXX database is that you can do searches on it. So where is bara, the Hebrew word for create, translated by poieo, to make, the Greek word for make, instead of whatever the Greek word for create is? I can't think of it right now. I'm sorry? Oh, okay, katiza. So, so what I'm going to do is, instead of opening it as a parallel pane, I'm going to open it as a separate tab. And remember the trick I showed you earlier? I'm just going to select a verse reference and amplify to Semitic Studies MTLXX parallel. And that way, when it comes up, come on. All right, let's see. All right, it's not, either I did something wrong or it's just too slow with the video software. All right, let me try this again. I don't know. All right, I'm just going to open it up. All right, there we go. I was trying to do the trick where it would automatically tie with the text and so on. But here you have the MTLXX parallel. I'm trying to get past all the preliminary stuff. And so I want to search for everywhere that bara in Hebrew is translated by epoiesin in Greek. Well, one way I might try to do that is within the tool itself. If I do bara in Hebrew, I get, we got a little bit of a clash here. I get 25 occurrences. All right, let's check that against the Hebrew Bible. If I do bara here, I get 54 occurrences. All right, why am I only getting 25 here in the tool itself? No, because we haven't really lined anything up yet. I mean, this should have every word in the Hebrew Bible. But what's going on? Well, let's look at the example here. Here's Genesis 1:1. The next hit is Genesis 1:27. What happened to Genesis 1:21? Well, if you notice, it's Vayivra. All right, here, even in Genesis 1:27, we've got Vayivra, and it didn't find that, because a tool is not grammatically tagged. So a search for a Hebrew word in a tool is not as sophisticated as a search in a tagged Hebrew text. Okay, so it's only finding the 25 occurrences where bara appears as bara, not as yivra or any other inflection. So what I'm going to do, we have a special command in that I believe we basically added originally for the MTLXX, called the merge command. And what the merge command does is it actually piggybacks off of the grammatical tagging of a text window and will find me all of these hits in the MTLXX. So I merged with the window containing Hebrew Bible. Let me do that again. All right, I'm going to go into search, enter command, merge. It automatically merged with the Hebrew Bible because that was the only viable window that it could merge with. If there were more than one Hebrew Bible window open, it would have asked me which one I wanted to merge with. And when I do this search now, I get 55 occurrences. Actually, the 55th is, I think, in a footnote somewhere. And so you can see there's Genesis 1:1. There's Genesis 121. If we go to 127, now Yivra is highlighted and so on. All right, so now I've searched the MTLXX for every occurrence of bara. Now let's say I want to find everywhere that the bara is translated by some form of poieo. Well, if I add the field, right, I can, let's see, how do I want to do this? I could try searching the Greek and do a search for poieo. But our first occurrence is Genesis 1:27, and if I do this, it can't even find a poieo. Because again, it's got inflected forms, poiesin, and so on. So what I want to do here is I'm actually going to duplicate this tab here and change my search text to the LXX. And then I'll do poieo. All right? And so now I've got 3,000 occurrences of poieo. And I'm going to come back over here, and in my MTLXX window, I'm going to add the AND command, and then do another merge command, and merge with the Septuagint. Oh, come on. All right, and now we've found 53 places where bara is translated by a poiesin. Okay, so it appears that it's usually translated. The 53 hits are probably 1 and 2, so it's probably half of the baras that are translated as a poiesin. But let's look through the hits. Let's see. That one's still okay. All right, here's an example of a false hit. Because you have bara on one line, and it's being translated by erksato, okay? And then poieo is on another line, but it's translating asa, okay? So this is where that distinction between article and paragraph becomes important. When you're searching these kinds of specialized databases, you want to make sure that you're searching not just the article, but the paragraph. And if I do that, now I get 32 occurrences. So it took that occurrence out because now they have to be in the same paragraph, which in this case is the same line of this particular database. This little icon right here that looks like a series of 4 lines. If you're on 11, you have to go into, I think, the magnifying glass again, and you'll see the option for paragraph or article. Okay, but we've tried to make those things a little more obvious because those are kind of hidden parameters that we wanted to be easily noticeable. All right, so anyway, that's the MTLXX parallel. There are some other really powerful tools that are designed like this. The CNTTS critical apparatus is another one that has line-by-line information, and you can do really sophisticated searches, but you have to make sure you're aware of that paragraph versus article parameter. Okay, is everybody clear on that? Even if you're never going to use the MTLXX parallel? All right. All right, let's go to some lighter stuff now, okay? I'm going to, and for this, let's do it from the text. I'm going to do 2 Samuel 11 again. People in the company are starting to make fun of me because it's as though I only know this one passage. But I love using this passage because there's so much literary artistry in this passage, but there's also lots of opportunities to use different features of accordance. And so in the spring of the year, the time when kings go out to battle, David sent Joab and his servants with him and all Israel, and they ravaged the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah. All right, well, Rabbah is a place. So, but David remained at Jerusalem. So I want to find out where Rabbah is. I'm going to select the name Rabbah and then go to the atlas icon on my toolbar if you've added that, or I could just go to the amplify icon and go down to map. And I'm going to choose light browns. That's my favorite map background. And it opens up a map with Rabbah highlighted on the map. Now, there are actually two Rabbahs on the map. Do you see that? There's one here and one here. All right, if you search for a place name, Accordance is not smart enough to go, oh, well, he's, this must be the Ammonite Rabbah. So it's just doing a search for that place name. And it finds all occurrences. Okay, so if you do, for example, Emmaus, there are about 3 different candidates for the biblical Emmaus. And so you'll get 3 Emmauses if you were to amplify to the atlas from Emmaus. And then it's up to you to sort out what's what. But here we've got these 2 Rabbahs. Well, which one is the right one? One of the things that we can do with the atlas is not just static pictures of a map. Okay, it is it's a software atlas that allows you to create your own maps, and you can completely customize the atlas to show you the information that you want. So to do that, first of all, let's look at the scope of the atlas. I'm going to magnify the atlas here. And let's zoom out. Your in and out buttons are down here in version 12. This is another change in 12. We've sort of gone with more of a Google Maps style look to the interface. So it's actually over the map. Now let's say that you want to copy the map, but you don't want the interface. You can hide the interface and then show it again. So you can take the interface off if you want to. In version 11, it's all up at the top part of the window. But you have the scope of the map covers all of the Bible lands. All right, so everything from Persia to Italy and from southern Romania down to Egypt. And you can, when you zoom in and out, you can zoom in at the regular increments. You can also hold the shift key down to zoom in at larger increments or zoom out at larger increments. If you hold the option key down and zoom out, is it option or control? No, I think it's option. Yeah, if you option zoom out, it will zoom all the way out so you can see the whole map. And you can also zoom in by dragging a box around a particular area and then just double click inside the box. Okay, that's my favorite way to zoom in. And I think, let's see, I think if you do Shift Command, you can actually click on a place to zoom in on that particular point. So it moved Megiddo to the center, and now I'm zooming in on Megiddo. All right. Okay, so that's zooming in and out. If I want to change if you're not crazy about this color scheme, you can always change to a different color scheme. And the way that we have the map backgrounds labeled gives you a hint as to what you're going to get. If it has a plural name, like light browns or colors or browns, it uses multiple colors to show differences in topography. All right, so differences in elevation. So you get a nice textured map with the mountains and valleys and so on. If it has a singular name, like green or beige or white, then it's just going to use a singular color for the land, and you just got a very simple, flat map. Okay? But of course, sometimes if you're printing out a handout or something, you want something simpler. And then we've got some fun ones like infrared and night vision for all those midnight bombing runs, right? So, all right, and then satellite. Now the satellite is sort of designed to look like a satellite map, but it's not really a satellite image. It's just using false colors. So if we go down here, we're going to see some green in parts of Egypt where there's not green, and so on. So those are the colors. And then down here you have layers that you can add onto the atlas, different kinds of information. The first of them is sites, and so I can choose major biblical sites, or I can do modern sites, and there I get Haifa and Tel Aviv and so on. I can do all ancient sites or whatever. And when you have, let's do all biblical sites. When you zoom in on the map or zoom out, you'll notice the number of sites will start to disappear, right? See, as I zoom out, I've got less and less room for the sites to appear without conflicting. So we just take some out. And as you go further out, you'll get fewer and fewer names. To do that, we had to rank the sites. So we give the sites a level of importance from 1 to 5, 5 being the most important. And so those are going to be places like Damascus and Jerusalem and Alexandria. And then as you zoom in, you'll get the 4s and the 3s. And if we zoom way in here, we'll start to get all these little bitty villages and so on. Okay. So so those are sites, and you can do, there are different kinds of sites and so on, but I won't get into that right now. Then the next pop-up menu is regions. And so you can do things like just labels like geographic names, or you can do things like tribes of Israel. And so those will give me the borders of the tribes of Israel. Or since we're reading about David and Solomon, we can go to Kingdom of David and Solomon. All right, and we can see just from overlaying that, that layer that now this Rabbah is the one in Ammon. That's the one that's being attacked. And this Rabbah is an Israelite town. Okay. We can also do, in addition to regions, we can do routes. And routes can be static routes like ancient highways or Roman roads, or they can be dynamic routes, journeys, like Abraham's journey.
Where did you get regions?
The regions is the second pop-up menu from the top.
Mine says geographical names.
Right, it's,
Oh, you gotta pick it.
yeah, geographic names is under regions. All right, so there's Abraham's journeys. Let's do, we've covered most battles in the, and most journeys in the Bible that can be mapped. So if we go to Conquest of Rabbat Ammon, this is another way to find out, oh, okay, that's the Rabbah that we're talking about. This is, here's your key down here, the very bottom right-hand side. So David is in the dark blue, and Joab and the army are in the light blue. So Joab takes the army, assaults Rabbah, besieges it, and then once they break into the water supply, they know it's only a matter of time before the people surrender and the city falls. And so Joab sends a message back to David and says, if you want to conquer this city and receive the spoils, you better get over here. You know? And so then David follows and takes the crown of the Ammonite king and so on. All right, so, and then we have a user layer, which, what happened to my user layers? I seem to have lost some of my user layers. But you have a user layer that you can use to create your own custom maps on the atlas. So if I need to create a handout and I want to put little text labels around certain cities or sites or whatever, I can create a user layer and then edit that user layer and draw lines and circles and complex shapes and so on. For the sake of time, I won't get into that right now.
Where did you find Conquest of Rabbah?
That's under Routes. That's the third pop-up menu. And if you're not seeing that, then we may need to look at your accordance installation.
What's the name of this resource again?
This is the Bible Atlas.
I-
No, the Accordance Bible Atlas. And then all right, so we've learned a little bit about where Rabbah is. Another thing that we can do from the atlas is double click on any place name to go to whatever default resource you set up from the atlas. So if I double click, it takes me to the Bible Lands Photo Guide 4, which is what I have as the default. We've now got an upgrade to the photo guide, which I need to set as my new default. But for now, we'll just look at this. So this will give me the Rabbah of Ammon, and it shows me all the pictures. And here's, the Acropolis, the Ammonite citadel. You can see how steep that Acropolis was, and which is also illustrative of 2 Samuel 11, because when Joab sends Uriah to his death, some other guys fall too. They get too close to the wall and they get killed. And Joab, when he sends back his report to David, is anticipating that he's going to get rebuked for this tactical mistake. And so he tells the messenger, if David gives you a hard time about this, tell him your servant Uriah is also dead. Basically a way to say, hey, David, I know where the skeletons in your closet are. Don't hassle me because of this tactical mistake. But we can see how easy it would have been to get within range of the missiles cast down from the walls. All right, so you've got the photo guide here, and then if I go down, there's the Rabbah of Judah, which is only mentioned in Joshua 15:60. So that other Rabbah is just a border site that is mentioned in Joshua. But the photo guide is really designed to be a companion to the atlas, and it's designed to be not just a series of tourist pictures, but a real teaching tool. And so we've gone to painstaking efforts to identify each picture, to tell you what you're looking at, to say, okay, if you look in the upper right-hand corner, you're going to see this. That was the old harbor of, this city or that or whatever. And so you can learn a great deal about the Bible and the text that you're looking at by spending a little time in the photo guide. The photo guide also has an article on the tabernacle, which is kind of cool. It's a reconstruction of the tabernacle, so you can get photographs of the tabernacle. You've got inscriptions and other things in there, animal life, wildlife. So if you need a picture of a hyrax, you can get a picture of a hyrax from the photo guide and so on. Yeah.
How do you change the default resource that's linked to the map names?
Great question. Go to Preferences and go to Map Tab Display, and there's where you specify your default tool under Hypertext. Okay. So, you can go to anything. If you want to go to Anchor Bible Dictionary, you can do that. But the photo guide is really designed to help illustrate the atlas. All right, so that's my plug for the photo guide. I'll get to the photo museum in just a minute. But let's see. So we've done the different layers. Let's just ask a simple question. How far is it from Jerusalem to Rabbah? All right, what kind of distance are we talking about? So when I hover over any point on the atlas, let's just go back to geographic names. When I hover over any point on the atlas, in the instant details box, you get the elevation in meters and feet, and you get the coordinates like I pointed out before. If I hold down the Option key and then click and drag from one point to another, the distance will be added up both in the instant details box and in up here at the top of the atlas window. Okay, so I get a distance of around 42 miles, 68 kilometers. Okay, from Jerusalem to Rabbah. If I want to follow one of these routes more exactly, I can actually, as long as I'm holding down the Option key, I can click and change direction and have the distances added up cumulatively, right? So I've covered, in this zigzaggy route, I've covered 133 miles. Okay, so just hold down the Option key and you can click and drag, and you can follow along with a route to get a truer sense of the distance. So about 43 miles. All right. And then the other thing, well, let's talk about the animation of the routes a little bit. Let's do something like the Battle of Gibeon, which is a, where am I? There we go. I'm going to the Route pop-up menu, the third pop-up menu, and choosing Battle of Gibeon. And you'll see the Canaanites in red assembling and attacking the city of Gibeon, which had made an alliance with the invading Israelites. And so these Canaanite kings are wanting to make sure that nobody else defects to the invading Israelites. So rather than attacking the Israelites, they attack Gibeon to make an example of Gibeon. And so notice that I stopped the animation there. I just clicked the animate checkbox and stopped the animation. So if I'm teaching on this, I can explain what's happening and then say, okay, so the Gibeonites sent messengers to Joshua and said, hey, we've got an alliance now, come save our necks. And so then Joshua and the Israelites come and honor the treaty, even though they were tricked into it, and defeat the Canaanites and then pursue them along the road to Beth Horon. All right.
How did you get the journey to move?
This little animate checkbox, you just can, once it runs its course, it unchecks. I can check it again and have it start over. And then I can stop it at any point. If you're projecting this, sometimes I'm teaching and I'll put a route up and I don't want to wait for the whole thing to complete. If you option check the animate checkbox, it will just complete the route. And that way you've just got the full route and you can talk about it. You don't have to wait for the animation. If you click the checkbox again, it'll pick up the animation where it left off when you option clicked. Okay. All right, so the last thing I want to show you is, let's zoom out a little bit for this. We've got this route here, and Joshua and the Israelites defeat the Canaanites and pursue them along the road to Beth Horon. But the road to Beth Horon runs to the north and the west, and they approached from the south and the east. Okay? Why did that happen? Why did they flee the way they fled? Is there some geographical reason for that? Well, let's find out by dragging a box around our map. And let's go into this little icon here that looks like a mountain and choose a level of 3D. I'm going to choose ×4. And so you'll get a 3D map. And here's your little set of controls. These are like joysticks. So I can zoom in and then I can kind of grab and pull the joystick out to move back or forth. The more I drag it out, the faster I'll go. And if I keep it in to the center, it'll move slowly. All right. And then you've got the turn joystick. And so I can orbit around this thing and turn it and orient it however I want. Well, here, let's turn this a little bit more like that. Here we can see why they fled the way they did. Right? If you're fleeing for your life, you don't want to flee uphill. So what they did was they tried to flee as quickly as they could out of the hill country and then work their way back to their own cities. So this is the kind of thing that the 3D map does for you. It enables you to see why a battle went a certain way, why a journey went a certain way. Well, there's a big mountain in the way, and so on. You can also, by the way, with this 3D map, you can grab it and move it with your cursor. You can, I think, drag with 2 fingers to zoom in and out. You can, I think, option drag to, let's see, I can't remember. There are all kinds of ways that you can manipulate it if you hold down modifier keys, and those are all in the help. But you've got, let me explain this pop-up menu here. The ×1, ×2, ×4, what is that? Well, it's how much, it's multiples of the actual altitude data. So if you do ×1, that's going to give you an accurate picture of the altitude of each hill and valley, right? So why then would you want to exaggerate it? Why wouldn't you just always want the accurate picture? Well, if you think about when you're in a plane and you're flying over, let's say the Rocky Mountains, if you're flying over the Rocky Mountains in a little Cessna at 200 feet, you can see how massive those mountains are, how tall they are, how deep the valleys are, and so on. If you're flying over the Rocky Mountains in a jetliner at 30,000 feet and you look down, even the Rocky Mountains look kind of flat. So it's the same with the atlas. The larger the area of the atlas you select, the higher up you basically are. And so the flatter everything is going to look. So we allow you to exaggerate the altitude data so that when you're selecting a large area, you'll get a reasonable picture. So if I were to do with this selection that I had, if I do ×1, you'll see it looks pretty flat. And I mean, this is, Dead Sea versus hill country. This is a difference of, what, 1,000, 1,500 feet or something like that. So, but it still looks very flat. So that's why I exaggerated it to ×4. Generally, if you are selecting a portion of Israel like this, ×2 will work pretty well. ×4 will start to look a little exaggerated. If you do all of Israel, ×4 is what I tend to use. If you're in the Aegean region and you're selecting all of Greece and Turkey or something, then I would do something like ×8, and then obviously ×16 if you're doing the whole map. So ×8, you can see even that doesn't look too exaggerated. All right. Yeah.
What did you do to get the animate checkbox up there on your?
I just chose a route that had animation. So in Battle of Gibeon, basically all of them do except for ancient highways, ancient major highways, and the Roman roads. So if you go into that pop-up menu and choose any of the other routes, it'll animate. Another thing to be aware of, there are different kinds of animation. Let's do, since we're here, let's do Paul's missionary journey. I don't know, first missionary journey. Notice too that when you select a route, Accordance will actually zoom in on the area that that route pertains to, so that you're not, it's not animating off the screen. But notice that my animation just sort of draws directly on the map. Okay. Does anybody have something that looks a little different? Okay. Do you have pre-drawn?
Yes, kind of a gray.
Right, right. So you'll get sort of these faded lines that are pre-drawn, and then it'll color that in. You can customize the Atlas display. What keyboard shortcut am I going to use?
Control-T.
Command-T, right? And I can go into the animation and choose no faded route. That's what I'm using now. You can also do continuous All right, so here's the normal. And let me animate it again. So there it's sort of pre-drawn, and then it kind of fills in, right? And when it finishes, it will stop. The next one is continuous, which is that, but it will start over once it stops. So, if you're creating a little kiosk at, someplace, you can run this thing and it'll keep going. And then you've got no faded route, and you've even got continuous no faded route. So this will actually draw without that pre-drawn thing. I prefer this because I cut my teeth on, Indiana Jones. It's all the, the lines going across the map, and so anyway, that's what this reminds me of. All right, so so that's the atlas. Let's talk a little bit about the timeline. All right, so here I've got David. I'm going to select David and click on the timeline. Again, I've got my icon here. I can also go into the Amplify and choose Timeline. And we've really revamped the timeline for Accordance 12 so that we've got a nice kind of cleaner, more subtle design. And you've got different items on the timeline. And here's your key down here in the bottom right. I've got rulers in purple, individuals in the sort of teal, and then events are in red. And that's actually a subset of all the items that we have. We could do all items, and we'll also get prophets and writings as well. And you can see if I start to zoom out, so we can see all the items just in Israel. It's all
Zooming in and out? How are you zooming in and out?
the little plus and minus icon right here.
Good.
Okay. So I can see everything, but I now need a magnifying glass to see it all, right? So we allow you to choose different items that you want to display. So if I just want to see rulers, I can choose rulers, and now I can see a lot more at the same zoom level. Okay. Or I can do combinations. Like I've set up my own custom rulers, individuals, and events layer, which is sort of a happy medium between just having one item or having all of them. If I zoom out, let's look at the different regions of the timeline. So we have Egypt, Israel, Palestine, Syria, Mesopotamia, Persia, Asia Minor, Greece, and then Rome. And what we've done is we've assigned each region its own color. So you can see Egypt is yellow and Israel is brown and so on. When the people of one region dominate the people of another region, that's when you'll see their color spill over onto that other region. So you can see, for example, the ebb and flow of the various empires. Here's the late Assyrian period. And you can see them conquering Anatolia, the Phoenicians and the Arameans, and then conquering Israel. But Judah still maintains some semblance of independence. And then we have the Neo-Babylonian Empire, and you can see Judah falls to them. Then the Persian Empire actually pushes into Egypt, conquers Egypt for a little while, loses Egypt for a little while, and gains them back right before this thin slice of orange, which represents Alexander the Great from Greece. So it's just a visual way to enable you to see what's going on in time. And you can also specify what regions you want to see. And you can customize this. So I can do all regions. I can do, say, Israel and Mesopotamia. If I want to compare, well, who are the kings in Israel at a particular time? Well, let's see here. It's hard with this small screen to get this so you can read it. So let's let me do this. I'm going to customize, oops, that's not what I wanted. No. Define item layers. I'm going into the item layer that I have defined right now, rulers, individuals, and events. And if you want to create a new item layer, just create one and then uncheck the stuff that you want to see and assign the colors and so on. But that's how I got this rulers, individuals, and events one. But the size is kind of small for this being on the projector. So I'm going to crank the size up to 170. And that gets a little easier to read. All right, so again, you can customize the timeline to get the look you want and so on. So here we can see, here's Jeroboam the second. Well, who's ruling at the time of Jeroboam the second? Well, we got Shalmaneser the third. No, he's before Shamshi-Adad, Adad-Nirari. I've never heard of those guys, right? We'll see that there's a reason we've never heard of those guys. In fact, if we look at the Mesopotamia region, we can see there's the Neo-Assyrian period and there's the late Assyrian period, and in between there's this gap where Assyria is in a state of weakness. Well, that gap corresponds pretty nicely with Jeroboam II and his reign. Now, Jeroboam II ruled the northern kingdom of Israel, and his reign is sometimes called the Israelite Renaissance. This was a period where they managed to conquer land that the Arameans had taken from them in previous administrations. They conquer a lot of those neighboring territories. They become very wealthy, and that's when you have the prophets castigating the women of Samaria for lying on their ivory beds while the poor are starving and so on. So it was a time of great wealth, and it's a time when the prophets are saying, look, don't get cocky, the end is coming soon. But the interesting thing about Jeroboam II's reign is we've already seen that he's able to do this partly because he doesn't have to worry about Assyria. Assyria is in a state of weakness. And if we look down at Judah, we see his reign corresponds almost exactly with the even longer reign of Uzziah. So you have these two kings in these neighboring kingdoms that reign for a very long time. So you have a lot of stability. You have records of each of them conquering their enemies. Uzziah conquers the Edomites, and Jeroboam is conquering the Arameans, but they're not fighting with each other. And so we get an idea of how these kings were able to do what they did based on what's going on in the world. We'll see similar things with David. Let's look at, well, before I leave good old Uzziah, let's double click on Uzziah here. And I'll talk a little bit about the Photo Museum. The Bible Times Photo Museum is a project that we've been working on for several years now. And it's designed to be for the timeline what the Bible Lands photo guide is for the Atlas. All right, so we are attempting to basically have articles on everything that's on the timeline. And we're illustrating those articles with artifacts that are found in various museums throughout the world, hence Photo Museum. The Photo Museum sort of began as a way to show artifacts. We had all these great photos of places, but what about seals and lamps and weapons and armor and all of these things that have been discovered that shed light on the Bible? And so the Photo Museum kind of serves those two functions. It gives us pictures of artifacts and explains what they were and why they were significant and so on, but also defines the items on the timeline.
How did you open it?
I just double-clicked on Uzziah on the timeline because I've set the Photo Museum to be my default. So in timeline display, just choose Photo Museum. We've just released a major upgrade to the Photo Museum, the Photo Museum 2. And the first iteration of the Photo Museum didn't have enough that I could say, make this your default for the timeline. This one I think does. And it's still a work in progress, and we've still got more work to do, but I think you'll find it really helpful. So I've got Photo Museum set as my default there. And here you've got an article on Uzziah. It starts to talk about, he received the positive assessment that he did what was right in the Lord's sight, aggressively expanded the territory of Judah by subduing the neighboring Philistines and so on. And I'm sure it'll talk about his relationship with Jeroboam II. This is kind of interesting. It says that Uzziah installed great siege engines. Well, this is earlier than, this is a Roman period ballista, but most major siege engines aren't really known until the time of the Greeks and the Romans. And so there's this passage that talks about Uzziah having invented some of these weapons to throw stones and to throw arrows and things like that. And so anyway, it's kind of an interesting thing. And then there's actually an epitaph of Uzziah. This is, let's see, Uzziah contracted leprosy, and so he couldn't be buried with the other royal tombs. So he was buried at a location outside the city of Jerusalem. But by the New Testament period, the city of Jerusalem was growing. And so they actually moved his tomb, and they found an epitaph of his tomb that says, don't disturb this. This is the tomb of a king who lived centuries ago who, we've moved his tomb now. So anyway, there's all kinds of interesting artifacts around this, and you can see here's under Menahem of Israel, you have the stela of Tiglath-Pileser that talks about Tiglath-Pileser's conquest. So Jeroboam II's successors end up having to deal with the Assyrians again, and we have records of their conquests and so on. And the cool thing about this is we can even read in this particular stela, we have links to the context of Scripture and to a resource published by Carta in Israel called The Raging Torrent. So if I click on this, I'll get a list of tribute bearers in the Iran stela. And so I'll get an introduction to that stela, and then I'll get the reading itself, and then you'll get commentary on the reading and so on. So there's all kinds of interesting ways to explore the backgrounds to the timeline. Let me just show you. In addition to political figures, we've got artifacts and so on. So if you want to show somebody an oil lamp, this will give you a history of the development of the oil lamp. And again, what we can do in software that we can't do that a print publisher can't do with a print Bible dictionary, they'll stick one or two photos in because it's expensive to publish photos in print. But we can actually give you in-depth photos chronicling the development of oil lamps, how they were made, and so on. We've got articles on armor and weapons and on and on. And so this is really a great resource for understanding the biblical world. All right, so, and you remember I kind of linked to the Photo Museum a couple of times in the life of David. Let me show you one more thing here with the timeline. Let's zoom in on the life of David. And here you've got David's life, and then you've got the events in David's life. All right? If I want to see how old David is at a particular time in his life, I can do what I did on the atlas. In the atlas, I option dragged to measure distances. In the timeline, you can option drag to measure time. So I'm just going to start from the beginning of David's life and option drag to the various events in David's life. And I'll see the time span added up here and also in the instant details box. So we go to Samuel anoints David, around 10, 11 years. That's younger than I always pictured. Right? David slays Goliath around 18. Okay, that sounds about right. If we go to David made king in Hebron, 31 years. And then if we go to David's adultery with Bathsheba, we get an age of almost 50 years. Remember, I pointed that out earlier. So, you can see, well, that's a little older than I ever pictured David being. It's certainly older than Hollywood ever depicts David being, right? And so it makes you wonder, was this a midlife crisis? You can begin to see relationships between events and individuals and relationships in time. The one last thing I want to show you is if I click in the time bar here or click and drag, I can actually select a range of years. And I seem to have a bug where it's not doing the range thing. So we got to get that fixed. But if I click on a particular time, let's just do 1000 BC, we'll begin to see everything that I have displayed on the timeline will get in a report. All right, now, right now it's only showing Mesopotamia and Israel, Palestine, because I narrowed the regions down to Mesopotamia. So I'm going to go to all regions, and we'll do it again. What was it, 1000 BC? So we'll see at 1000 BC, in the middle of David's reign, we see that in Rome, the Latins are just beginning to settle. In Greece, you're in the Dark Age between the earlier Mycenaean period and the later Classical Greek period. In Asia, the Assyrians are beginning to move into Asia Minor, and so the Hittite Empire has fallen, and you're in a state of decay. And then in Mesopotamia, Assyria is in decline, and in Syria and Palestine, you have David vying for power with all of these other neighboring kings. And then in Egypt, you're in the third intermediate period. So we can kind of see at a glance that David is able to expand his little empire precisely because the major world powers were all kind of in a state of turmoil, right? Egypt is in the intermediate period. Greece is in a dark age. The Hittite Empire has fallen. The Assyrians are starting to move in, but they're still in a period of decline for much of this time, and so on. So, so those are the kinds of things that the timeline enables you to see and explore.
How did you set that time range again?
All I did was clicked in the time bar. And there's actually a little bug. You used to be able to sort of click and drag, and then when I let go, it should give me that range of you. Well, there, it did it. All right, so what did I do wrong the first time? I don't know if it's that I'm taking too long to do it. There, well, no.
I've got it highlighted, but it's not popping up anything.
Yeah, it's not working for me either.
Okay, something's.
Oh, there.
It did it for me there. Now it's 999 to 941.
In that range.
Did you click in the range?
After I released and then went back.
Okay, let's try that. Oop.
Are you in 11 or 12?
11, it should work fine. In 12, we may have a little issue that. All right, if I select and then click, okay, that did work. We'll have to get that ironed out, but that's how you do it. Either click or click and drag to select a range of years.
As far as these bugs, are we informed of upgrades by email?
If you go into your preferences, you can do, well, let's see. If you do check for app update, it's telling me I'm up to date. But if I go to preferences, I think I can have it automatically check for updates. But here it is, updates. automatically check for application updates. So when there's a new update, it'll tell you and say, do you want to update now? And it'll give you a list of what's changed. So it'll tell you these are the bugs that were fixed, or here's a new feature that was added, and so on. And then you can specify, do you want to check once a day? Do you want to check once a month? And so on. All right. And you can do the same for your modules, automatically checking for module updates. All right. So so those are most of our graphic resources. Any questions? Go ahead.
I just happen to notice that you've got the conservative and the critical.
Oh, yeah.
On the timeline, so if you go and look up the figure, Daniel, on the conservative one, it'll show when he existed, and if you go to the critical one, he never existed.
Right.
I just had to throw it out.
All right. So if I let's see. Oh, this is. Yeah, I gotta fix something that I did in a recent webinar. Just a second. Let's just do no user items here. All right, so if I go to the Exodus, for example, yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I forgot to mention the conservative and critical dates. So when we first developed the timeline, we actually had people tell us, you know, you don't even want to open this can of worms because, you know, scholars argue their whole lives about these issues, and you know, you're going to upset somebody. And we said, well, you know, we don't want to not do a great feature because we want to avoid controversy. So we decided what we'll do is we will cover two sort of broad stroke approaches to biblical chronology. And we went round and round about the names. If we wanted to offend everybody, we could have said, you know, liberal and fundamentalist or something. I don't know. But we came up with conservative and critical. And what we mean by those labels, we still don't have everybody happy because, of course, the conservative scholars say, well, that implies I'm not critical, and I am. And the critical scholars come in and say, well, I'm very conservative on my date of this thing or that thing or the other, you know. So we still get grief over it. But the conservative dating scheme basically takes the chronological information in the Bible at face value unless there's just overwhelming reason not to. So, for example, and even conservative scholars will sometimes, well, let me give you an example. In the Hebrew, the reign of Saul is listed in a certain place as being 2 years. Well, we know the reign of Saul wasn't 2 years, so we know that that's got to be some kind of textual issue. And so nobody would regard the reign of Saul as only lasting 2 years. You've got the entire book of 1 Samuel that makes it clear that he had a much longer reign, and you have dates elsewhere that talk about a longer reign. So so that's a place where there's overwhelming reason not to accept that particular chronological information. But you have other places, for example, in 1 Kings, when Solomon begins building the temple, it says that he began building the temple, I think, 480 years after the Exodus. And if we know that he began building the temple in 961 BC, then it's just a matter of, or 966 BC, then it's just a matter of counting backwards to get a date of the Exodus of 1446 BC. Okay, so conservative scholars would basically say, hey, it says 1446 BC, we'll accept that. Critical scholars are less willing to take the chronological information in the Bible at face value. So they would say, well, wait a minute, hold on. There are reasons to doubt that particular figure. And they might point to lack of archaeological evidence in, various places at certain times. Or the big one is that they point to the fact in Exodus where it says that the Hebrews, the oppressed Hebrews, built the store cities of Pithom and Ramses. Well, Ramses doesn't come along, Ramses as a pharaoh doesn't come along until Ramses the First in 1320, 100 years later. And so they therefore say, well, it's got to be after the reign of Ramses II, who established a capital at Pi Ramses and so on. So that's why they would then date the Exodus later, around 1250. And if we select the Exodus and click on the conservative button to toggle the critical date, you see everything gets a lot fuzzier, and you get a date of around 1250 for the Exodus. So you can compare the two chronologies and see what you think. One of the reasons everything gets fuzzier is you now have the Exodus, the conquest, and Judges period all sort of contracted into a shorter period of time. And so their critical scholars are less willing to say, well, here's where the Exodus began, here's where it ended, here's where the conquest began, and so on. So, so anyway, you've got both of these broad brush kinds of chronologies that you can compare. And the next question becomes, well, where did we get our dates from? What was our source? What we decided to do, we talked about, well, do we do sort of an eclectic approach, or do we just pick an authority and stick to that? We decided to pick an authority and stick to that. And so if you go into the help and go to Accordance Help and go to the timeline and then go to the timeline dates, under Understanding Conservative and Critical Dates, it'll basically tell you what I just told you about the two broad brush frameworks. And then it'll give you the date sources. And so we have, for the conservative dates, we use Eugene Merrill's Kingdom of Priests in the Old Testament period. In the New Testament, we base that on a work by Harold Hoehner. And the critical dates, we used Jack Finnegan's Handbook of Biblical Chronology. And even Finnegan is on the, he's sort of a mediating figure. There are much more critical chronologies that go even further, but those become, there are more critical chronologies that are more skeptical about the dates, the chronological information given in the Bible. But those become so difficult to pin down on anything that we couldn't really base anything on them anyway. So, so even our critical dates are not the most critical you could get, but those are our sources there. Okay, so does that make sense to everybody? But it's I love having both of them, because then you can sort of toggle back and forth and compare the two and see what where the controversies are. All right, so we've got about 15 minutes left. I want to make sure that I've scratched everybody's itch as much as possible. So if you all have specific things that I haven't shown you that you want me to do, or any questions, go ahead.
The question of the photo museum, given that it would be something probably that would be used with students, how likely is it that Oak Tree would grant permission to include on handouts, and indeed the timeline as well? Because there's nothing stated about copyright on that.
Sure.
Let's see.
Well, the timeline, you're basically accessing the timeline. You're welcome to, use it on handouts as visuals and stuff. We don't really put any limitation on the timeline. With the photo museum, let me just open up the photo museum. With the photo museum, I think we say at the beginning, basically copyright and usage of photographs. Unless otherwise indicated, all photographs are copyright Oak Tree, and then we've got a couple that belong to other people. But basically anything that is not specified as the Israel Antiquities Authority or a couple of others, you're you're welcome to use. All we ask is that, if you're producing a work for publication, then you'd need to get permission to reuse images and so on. But in terms of anything you're going to hand out to students, you're welcome to use the images in there.
Same thing online courses?
Probably. Online courses you might want to, it never hurts to ask, and you'll probably get a yes.
Okay.
But it would probably depend on how widely disseminated it's going to be and stuff. And we might say, well, sure you can use it, but only do it at a certain resolution or something like that. So, which most online courses are not going to be the highest resolution anyway. So. All right. Any other questions?
The slideshow, in which context or for what proposal is it used?
Sure. We've got a slideshow feature, and the way the slideshow works, it's basically designed for, if you're teaching out of accordance. Let's say that I've got, 2 Samuel 11 up, and then I get my map of Rabbah. All right, and let's say I want to show the timeline too. So I'll do David on the timeline, and then I'll do something like David's adultery with Bathsheba in the photo museum. Okay, so I've opened up all of these different resources. Right now, the slideshow, if I wanted to present each of these things, if I do slideshow in the window menu, it's going to tell me you have to have one zone per workspace. And so what I would need to do is take all of this and say, you know what, let's drag this zone and make it a tab of this zone. And naturally, there's not enough room. All right, let's try going this way. So I'm going to make this a tab of that zone, and then I'll drag the timeline in there. And then I'll drag the photo museum in there. And if I want photographs, let's take one of these photographs here. I believe I had done the House of David inscription. So I'm going to open this. Now, if I click, you get the photograph in this sort of hover over window, right? But if you click the little arrow, it will put it into its own tab, and then I can take that and I can put it into my slideshow. You can also, in any resource that has photos, if you command click the image, it will automatically add it as a tab, and you won't have to go through that first sort of preview window. And it will also make the window unrecyclable. Let's see, this one, yeah, it made that unrecyclable too. So, so if you just are collecting pictures from a resource, just command click those pictures, and you can very quickly assemble a slideshow. And then, I might drag things around and say, I don't know. I don't know that I'd show the timeline, but anyway, I want my text first, and then we'll get into Rabbah later, and so on. Let's see, what is that? All right, so then each of these tabs becomes a slide in my slideshow. And when I do slideshow, it will move all of the accordance interface out of the way. It probably should have moved that caption out of the way too. And then I can click using this little palette that will kind of disappear. I can, all right, where is it? Well, now I lost my palette altogether. But, all right, what's going on? Slideshow. All right, so if I click, oh, I'm at the end. I can go to the beginning. If I click, I can go from slide to slide. I believe you can also just click in the pane to go from slide to slide. And then I can go back. I can use this menu to go back to a particular slide. And obviously, I wouldn't use all these as slides, but where are my pictures here? But that's the slideshow. And I've actually used it on a number of occasions. You want to kind of set it up beforehand and make sure everything's sized right. For instance, I'd want to size this bigger and so on. But it's really handy. And the nice thing is when you're in an app, in the map, you can overlay routes, and so have the animated routes going. So if I do, where is it? Conquest of Rabat Aman, then that'll be animated, and as I go through my slideshow and so on. All right, and I can click the animate checkbox again and do it again.
What was the function? Could you please tell me what's the animate?
Yes, this little animate checkbox here. That starts the animation and stops it again. Okay. All right, any other questions?
There's not a way to take that and drop that into a PowerPoint, though, is there?
You can, not with the animation. You can copy it. You can copy the, where is it? Copy picture. That will copy the entire map that's shown. Or you can select a portion of it, and then it will change to copy picture selection, and that'll be, so you can actually crop your pictures as you're copying. But if you wanted the animation, you would have to do some kind of screen recording utility. But you could do that and then drop that into a Keynote or a PowerPoint. All right? Anybody else? There is, the first time I did a accordance seminar, I thought, how in the world am I going to talk about accordance for 8 hours? At the end of that 8 hours, I thought, oh my gosh, I could talk for another 32 hours. We've really just scratched the surface, and there's a lot that I haven't shown you. But I hope that I've at least exposed you to some of the options that are available that will make your life a little easier, and hopefully shown you some things that maybe you didn't know that accordance could do. So I hope this was helpful to you, and I appreciate your attentiveness. It's a lot to soak in, and so I admire your fortitude.